What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you an update to dinos. That's right, I did a poll the other day. You lot all voted for dinos as the most popular between that, light swans and of course heroes, but don't worry, I will be bringing you those updates as well. Now, the best thing about dinos is it has a very nice variety that allows you to go first, second, or if you have access to it, you can even play a Fiendsmith version of the deck. Now, as I take you through this profile, I'll show you all the staple cards you're going to want to be looking for, no matter what version you are playing, and then I'll talk you through the cards that you will interchange out, should you want to be changing it from a first to a second, or even, as most competitive in my opinion, utilising the Fiendsmith cards. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Diving headfirst into the profile, we start off with our staple dinos, and that is of course triple soul eating Oviraptor. Now I'm hoping by the time this video goes out the ban list hasn't dropped as yet, but then I also hope that if the ban list has dropped that it allows us to have Misk back to free. It'd be really kind of cool to see what happens with Misk back to free with this deck. Yes, I know we had it before, and then it's obviously been limited again, but I do feel that dinos could still really compete if it had Misk back to free. So you've got your free Soul Eating Oviraptor. This is your ideal starter. This is the one that's going to get you everything you need to do. This is going to get your Archosaur into rotation for you because you'll be able to get this off of the back of your Miscellaneous, which will just quickly jump ahead so you can see. So you're going to be going straight for your Miscellaneous. You discard the Miscellaneous to protect all your dinos, banish this from the graveyard, summon back Archosaur, and then you're able to make your plays that way. There are other combos and other routes that will allow you to keep going further, but it really comes down to what you have in hand, but that's just kind of like the basic ideal premise. Then we go with probably, in my opinion, one of the best main deck boss monsters around, and that is the Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. This is still an absolutely insanely powerful boss monster. The fact that it can attack all of your opponent's monsters once each, the fact that it can Book of Moon your opponent's entire board, and then of course just send them to the graveyard and burn them for 1,000 is insane. This is one of the original OTK boss monsters that is absolutely mental for the deck, and it was a great introduction when they did receive it way back when. Then of course the other one we play is the one Xeno Meteorus. Now this is one came as a super and a collector's rare, so very easily be able to pick this one up. But the idea is when you're utilising a card like Xeno Meteorus, you're going to be utilising a vanilla in the form of the Frostosaurus, which is the one that most people go to in order to initialise rank 6 plays. But it does also mean that you will be relying on Ground Xeno, which I'm hoping very shortly, if not in the Megatins of 2024, this gets a nice reprint, which then also argues the fact that maybe if Mist does come back to free, it'll get a little bit more hype for this card as well. Then of course you've got your babies, so you've got triple baby Cerosaurus, and I like to play the one Petite Pterodon. You of course can play a 3 and a 2 if you want to, you can play a 2 and a 1, it really comes down to the version that you are playing. The best thing about baby Cerosaurus is it actually gets more utility from board breakers like Dark Hole, and do not laugh at that because the amount of times I've actually had to sometimes normal summon a baby and activate Dark Hole to trigger off because the hands have been a little bit underwhelming is actually quite interesting because straight away you benefit from the Dark Hole as well as clearing your opponent's board off, so that's one benefit that the board breaking version will get. That being said, when you are utilising baby Cerosaurus with of course Ground Xeno, that's kind of where you're going to get the most advantage from it because the Ground Xeno will allow you to destroy the baby and then you're just going to be able to keep summoning dinos from the deck as you need to. So that's of course if you don't have Ground Xeno. Dark Hole is still a very interesting board breaker for you to consider. Then I've gone with the Kaitera. Now the reason I've gone with this over the Giant Rex is I am playing the Polymerization version, but on top of that as well, it gives you a route to get to a field spell, which means you can actually unlock the Lithosagum in this particular deck a lot more consistently, because it does give you access through this into your Horned Soraris in order to get you into either Lost World or Dragonic Diagram. Now again, this is something that I would like to see post-ban list, that maybe Diagram comes back to free, but even then, being able to play at 1 gives you access to the Lithosagum, and the reason this card is so good in the deck is it allows you to pop the babies, trigger their effects, as well as looking at your opponent's extra deck and getting rid of free pesky cards. Especially when extra decks are so tight right now in today's meta, being able to get rid of free specific cards can be quite damaging as long as you pick the right ones. Then the last monster we play is the one Dino Wrestler Prankatops. You could main deck the Dogra and the Mad Flame Kaiju if you wanted to, but like I said, you kind of want that balance of first and second, and what Prankatops gives you is it's a way to being able to summon this out to your board, even if you go first, and it provides you with a nice little bit of tribute and then target destruction, as well as being a 2600 boss monster, so it's really kind of cool and utilised in the deck. Then of course we are playing triple Fossil Dig, being able to add any level 6 or lower dino from the deck to the hand is absolutely insane. So obviously when you did have Miss get free, you would have 6 copies of Miss, you have 6 copies of Oviraptor. The consistency in the deck is actually quite high, and the fact that you can even get you a baby should you need to, because you've already opened up Ground Xeno, just gives you that little bit more consistency. Speaking of Ground Xeno, you can now afford to play it at 2 if you want to. If you want to, you can easily bump it up to 3. But the idea behind this is you have to add a Dino Tuner or a Dino Normal from the deck to your hand. Now the chances are, once you've activated it once, that is the only time you're going to resolve it, because more times than not, your only tuner you're going to be going for is going to be your Xeno, and then your Xeno will ultimately lead you into your Vanilla, so then you won't be able to resolve a second copy. Now, this one isn't very easily searchable, unlike the double evolution pill that I'll talk about in a second. So the idea is that you want to be seeing it free to get it as max consistency, but then you're adding a garnet that you're not really going to be able to utilize to its max potential unless you change up the deck a little bit. So it does have a bit of a flex spot if you want to, but what you want to try and do, especially if you don't have access to the Ground Xeno, is I wanted to make sure that the build could be one of them ones that doesn't rely core and solely on Ground Xeno. It has that ability to make plays whether you have it or not, and then it's kind of one of them ones that if you're looking to put this deck together and you're like, you know what, I don't have access to the Fiendsmith, I don't have access to the Ground Xeno, how do I change it up? Well, straight away, that's 4 cards that you take out of the main deck, and then that would allow you to go into 4 additional board breakers or 4 additional hand traps. Speaking of, you do play double evolution pill. This is just one of the ones that if you hard open up one of them, quite like a Vision Hero increase, if you open up one of them, part of your combo dies, which is a real pain in the backside when combos like that exist, but that is part and part of the game. So you need to be playing 2 so that if you do see 1, you still have an option to search out the second. It's still insanely powerful. The fact to get you direct access to your boss monster into the form of UCT is massively damaging because it can really, really hurt your opponent. The biggest downside is it does Banisher's Cost, and when you're playing Giant Rex, even if you Banisher's Cost and they stop it with an Ash, you still get some form of advantage to the board. But that's why I've kind of gone with the Kite Terror, is because that will then get you a little bit more access to your fusion monsters, and like I said, solely focus more on the field spells. Speaking of the field spells, we play the 1 Lost World, the 1 Diagram, and then the 1 Terraforming, so obviously you can have either or. So the Terraforming kind of acts as a pseudo option to either of these, as you might not always be able to guarantee to get into your Solaris, and that's kind of where you need to keep in mind. The Poly is of course solely in here because it's searchable off of the Kite, and this isn't going to let you get into the Horned, and it's kind of just a direct combo route option, so that's something you do need to kind of keep in mind, and that's kind of the reason that you play it the way you do. The last spell card that you play is Pot Prosperity. Now, the only version that you'd probably want to take this out is the Fiendsmith version because the extra deck just becomes even tighter. But even that being said, most of your Dino extra deck cards that you are playing are not as staple, so it does give you a little bit more flexibility should you need to. And then the final 9 cards of the deck, these could be board breakers, these can be direct hand traps, they can be the Fiendsmith cards. It really does come down to what you have access to. I've kind of gone with a balance, and what I mean by that is I've gone with cards that go first or second. So the ones that can do that job for you is Imperm and Droplet, and then obviously I followed it up with the generic Ash Blossom. But you can very easily sub any of these in for stuff like Nibiru's, but I feel that Nibiru is definitely more tailored, focused for going second. You can then look at stuff like Raigekis, Dark Holes, you name it, you've got a lot of flexibility in the deck should you want to go for it, and you can cut the Dino count down, like I've already mentioned, with the Ground Xeno, and of course the Xenos and the Vanilla. So it does give you a bit of flexibility should you wish to. It really comes down to your personal playstyle, whether you want to be going first, whether you want to be going second, and then whether you want to be trialing out the Fiendsmiths in the deck. Now the Fiendsmiths totally go with 1 Tract, 3 Engraver, 1 Lorry. So straight away you've got a main deck of 5 cards that you straight away can sub in for 5 of those hand traps, or of course that's your 2 Ground Xeno and your 2 additional dinos that go with that particular route of play. And then that would then allow you to access the Fiendsmith engine a little bit more. And the consistent synergy overlap is it will allow you to get into your Lars a little bit more consistently, but you do need to remember that this will only become a detached 1 if all of its materials are dragons or dinos, or reptiles, sorry. But it's probably obviously going to be one of the ones where if you use the engraver, you're not going to get that. But that then does give you the option if you wanted to play your DDD High Wave King, as well as burn option and everything else in between. So moving on to the extra deck, of course, we've got the 1 Horned and we've got the 1 Transcendosaurus. So obviously this one does particularly require the Kite Terror, and it requires a Dino or a Dragon monster. It gets to attack directly the turn it is special summoned, so a nice 2k straight to your opponent's face. But then you also get the ability that if it is fusion summoned, you get to place a field spell from the deck or graveyard face up into the field zone. And then during your main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolve normal summon a Dino or Dragon. So it just gives you so much more resource to the board, and it is a level 6, so it can be utilised as overlay material. The Giant Zala, of course, is a card that you can cut if you don't go down the poly route, and especially if you take out the ground Xeno, because it does require a normal monster. But the idea is this can just become an additional boss monster that allows you to float back from the graveyard. So for those of you unfamiliar with this, if it is special, you get to target a dino in your graveyard and add it back to the hand, so you can loop back the miscellaneous if you haven't already used its banished in the graveyard effect. And then on top of that as well, if this was special summon from the graveyard, you get to destroy 2 cards. One from your hand and one on the field, and one of your opponent's cards. So one from your hand or your field, and then one of your opponent's cards. If this card is destroyed, you get to shuffle a normal monster from your graveyard into the deck, and then you get to special summon this card. So that's how you can kind of loop it back, and there's also ways that you tribute this off with UCT, and then you get to float it back to the board. We've then got the one Evil Saw Lars, and obviously more times than not you're going to want to make this with only dinos or reptiles, obviously mainly dinos in this particular deck, but the idea is that when you do that it becomes a detached 1/2 Omni Negate, which is really, really important. And then for the other XYZs, we've got the one Lagia and the one Dolka. So obviously you've got your Spell and Trap Negator, you've got your Monster Negator, you've got pretty much everything you need with all of these cards. Then the only other rank, the XYZ we play is the Daguerreus, just because being able to bring back a UCT and then making it 7k is absolutely mental. And then carrying on for the Link monsters, you've got the one Reapodonkus. Now the reason you play this is if you are dino locked but you have a non-dino on the board, you can turn that into the Reapodonkus, because this then becomes a dino and it just requires 2 monsters, so it's nice and generic. And then of course it has the ability to declare an attribute or a type and then change a monster that it points to that type. So that allow you to, again, keep going further forward. If you've got a level 4 that isn't a dino, very rare in this particular main deck, but then that gives you the option to kind of utilize it. Now keep in mind, even if you change it into a dino and then put it as, for example, if you turned a Fiendsmith into a dino and then overlaid in Lars, I'm pretty sure it doesn't remain a dino once it becomes a material. So if you're thinking about that loophole, I'm 99% sure that won't work, but the idea is just to get you out of locks should you be locked under a card that says it requires 2 dinos to make. And then of course you've got your one Nightmare Phoenix, pretty standard on that one, alongside the one Relinquish Anima. So this is how you can turn your Archosaur into a non-dino in order to get it to the board, but it can also be a very great card going second as well. IP Masquerena to lead you into your SP Little Knight. You've also got your Pentastag to help you do piercing damage off of the back of your UCT, because sometimes that send for 1000 isn't enough, and being able to pierce for when you're at 7k is going to be the game changer. Cross Sheet, because we play 2 fusion monsters, of course, the idea is it will need you to go a little bit out of your way to make the Cross Sheet first, to then fusion summon, to then revive from the graveyard, but that's something you're going to want to consider, because that will allow you to work your way up into either Appaloosa or, of course, Access Code. The idea behind that is, again, if you don't use the Ground Xeno, if you don't use the Poly, if you don't use the Giant Zala, of course you take all of that out, you'd also take out the Cross Sheep, and that's when you're going to start filling in with stuff like your Fiendsmiths. If you wanted to go down a Super Poly Board Breaker option, of course that's where your flexibility comes from there as well. So you're going to get in the best of everything you need to. Whether you, like I said, want to go down a Board Breaker route, whether you want to go down a full-on hand trap route, or whether you want to go down a Fiendsmith route, you've got loads of versatility with a dino deck. And as you'll see from most of my builds and most of my decks, I like decks that have the ability to shift up strategies. When you're looking at stuff like the Ragnarok as well, I like playing with the Ragnarykus because I can go down Traptrix control, I can go for reptile spam, and then of course you can also consider Naturia control in that as well. There are cards that I play that are particular monotype. When you look at heroes as well, they only play heroes. But then you also look at Synchrons. Synchrons can be adaptive. You've got White Forest that can be adaptive as well. They can go, you know what, we want to play a runic version, we want to play a toy box version. So I feel that when it comes to deck building and when it comes to selecting decks to play, I love the option of having a deck that have these variations, especially when you can shift it from a control to an OTK or a go first to a go second, because I feel it just gives you more variety from the one deck and the deck doesn't become stale as quickly as something else as well. But that's just my personal preference. Maybe that's something you like as well, but that's kind of what I wanted to show with all these types of decks that I'm currently doing. It's just to show you the versatility, and that's also something that's really kind of cool with Light Swans as well, is you can play Chaos Light Swans, you can play Light Swan 60 card mill with the tier elements and the Bestials and the Horus and everything else in between, or of course you just play pure Light Swan. So that is pretty much it for the entire profile. If you do have any questions at all, by all means please put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. But for now, until that ban list drops, stay safe and of course, happy dueling.